Welcome to my grandpa's train. Today's project is going to be finishing the 326 Hudson. There are a few things that need to be finished on this locomotive. I'll start from front to back. The pilot truck has a chipped wheel and I have a replacement for that. The headlight is incorrect. I have new headlight for this locomotive. And let's see, the drawbar bolt is missing, so I used a screw and a nut. I'm going to put a replacement on that, so that is correct. And then the reverse mechanism has a problem where it's a little sluggish, so I need to fine tune it. It doesn't quite work correctly. And the speaker for the electronic air chime horn whistle is not connected. In fact, it's not even in the tender at all at the moment, so I'm going to be installing that and hooking it up with a new capacitor. I had a box of parts show up today in the mail from an electronics supplier called Mouser. So we're going to open this. You can't really see it in the camera. Priority 2, so it's not important. Alright, we're going to get into this and get this thing going here. So, I was going to replace the pilot truck with an entirely new assembly. This one here I got new from Little Steamers. This is to replace the missing pilot on my 310 locomotive, but it's also the exact same size as the one for the Hudson. But I learned something, and that is that these wheels are just pressed on. So I just was able to pull this wheel off and I can press on a new complete wheel. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and then put this back together. One more thing I have to do on the locomotive is I'm going to install traction tires. This locomotive tends to slip a lot because the motor has so much power, but it doesn't have quite as much weight as some of my other locomotives. These drive wheels are solid, they're not spinning over the rims, but I'm going to try putting these traction tires on. They came from Milwaukee Flyer on eBay, and we'll see if this increases its pulling capacity at all. Well, traction tires are not meant for this locomotive, but I discovered a different problem. And to paraphrase Dave's American Flyer trains, look for the solution, not the illusion. What I thought was the problem is that it was missing its original traction tires. This locomotive was never designed for traction tires. The traction tires would not stay on. These are actually designed for smooth tires, but they are very, very slick, and they just fell off the tires and caused derailments. The real problem with this is that the pilot truck is off, and by that it has some spacers underneath. I don't think you can see them here. There are two spacers, and the spacers are underneath the truck. One of them, I think, should be on top of the part that it rides on, because the pilot truck is actually pushing up on the front of the locomotive. I've had this on a different locomotive. I think it was an HO scale one actually, where the pilot truck was sitting too low and it was consequently pressing up on the front drive wheels, and these front drive wheels weren't actually sitting on the rails, therefore it was not getting full traction on the rails. So now what I'm going to do is take apart the front truck and see if I can correct the issue with the spacers to see if it will sit correctly on the rails, because the whole front of the engine is lifted up just a little bit. Not to mention that I think the pilot itself is actually bent. You can't see it on camera, but in person I can see that it's slightly angled up, which it is not supposed to be. Once the locomotive problems are all worked out, then I'll tackle the tender. Okay, what you see here is my American Flyer 326 tender wired up with the speaker and the original capacitor in place, and I have it hooked up to an air chime whistle generator as well as a transformer here. I checked out the wiring diagrams. We have black wire is the base post, red wire goes to the 7 to 16 volt, yellow wire goes to constant 16 volt, and then the green wire down here I have tied to a jumper, which is the hot side of the rail. That goes, I have it just tied directly to the tender truck. And then The black wire is base post. I actually just have it coming right to the top common of the speaker. And we can power up the locomotive. I have a ventilation fan running. Now, when I turn on the locomotive, you'll hear the electrical humming coming from the speaker. Alright, so it's in neutral right now, and that's track voltage that's spilling through the voice coil in the speaker. So the horn actually works correctly, now that I have it wired correctly. But what I'm going to do now is to replace this capacitor with a new one to see if that will eliminate that buzzing coming through the voice coil, because I don't think it did that from the factory. All I should hear is this. There should not be any more buzzing coming through the speaker. And in the background you can hear my fluorescent light fixture buzzing away, but that's separate. Now what I'm going to do is replace the capacitor with a brand new one of the recommended value listed in Tom Barker's American Flyer Repair Guide, 25 microfarads at 25 volts. Although in this case I was able to find a substitute that is close enough. That would be 27 microfarad at 50 volts, and the reason is it's substantially cheaper. So I was able to get 50 of these capacitors for future repair work at like 10 to 15 cents a piece, whereas a 25 microfarad 25 volt capacitor would have been about $3. So basically I got all of these for the price of one exact match. And you can always go higher in capacitance, you can never go lower. Same with the voltage, you can always go higher in voltage but never lower. So if this locomotive runs up to 16, 18, maybe 20 volts on a high output transformer, 25 volts is really close to that limit. So the 50 volt capacitors aren't any more expensive, so I just got those instead. Alright, I'm going to replace this and we'll be back. Alright, I was able to figure out how to get both capacitors in at the same time so that I could do a side-by-side comparison of one or the other. So this is the sound with the old capacitor stuffed in. And that's not, the horn is not activated right now, but you can hear all that buzzing coming through. And that is, the horn generator works quite well. Now I'm going to tuck in the so the buzzing is greatly reduced with the new capacitor. But the horn sounds just as loud as it was before. Alright, that is that. So now I'm going to tidy this up, and test this over on the tracks. Well, the 326 is at last complete. So everything that could have been fixed on here has been fixed. I have a new headlight installed in the front. It's nice and bright. The speaker in the tender has a new capacitor. The reverse mechanism works as well as these can. There's always a little bit sticky, but there's not much we can do about this one. Let's see. Various parts have been replaced on the locomotive, including the drawbar link pin and several pieces of the valve gear on each side. I put in a new smoke tube originally. Now let's take this for a spin and see how this operates. I also have the Chime whistle generator hooked up into the circuit so that I can test the horn whistle on the layout. And it's nice and loud. Alright, here we go.